Alright, what's going on everybody? So in this video we'll be going over how to use the quadratic formula. This is going to be probably a long video, but we'll see how this goes. It's going to be broken up into two parts, and because there's two things you need to really look at when you're using the quadratic formula. So first part, the whole quadratic formula is actually written as follows: x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all of it divided by 2a. Now, the only time you could use this formula is if your quadratic equation is in standard form. So part of the challenge is also to be able to use inverse operations to get into standard form, where a times x squared plus bx plus c is the form. Now this right here is known as the quadratic term. This is your linear term. This is your constant. So anytime a problem refers to a, is with the one with the x squared. If it's referring to b, your b is the one with the x, and if they ask for c, that's your constant. It has no variable. Now specifically, the discriminant is this part right here, the b squared minus 4 times ac. So without the square root. Now this is special because this will tell you how many roots there are. So when it's positive, basically, if the number that you get when you solve it is positive, that means you're going to have two real roots. That means that they will show up as x-intercepts. If the number equals exactly 0, that means you're only going to have one root or one x-intercept. Now, here's the tricky one. If you end up with a negative number, that means the parabola will have no x-intercepts, but it will have two imaginary roots, or also known as complex roots. So positive 2, 0, 1, negative, no real roots, but there is two imaginary or complex roots. Alright, so here's the first question. So I already see a typo. That's supposed to be squared. So I'm going to rewrite it. So as this stands, this is not in standard form. I do know it's quadratic because I see the x squared there. Now, as I read the problem, it says can be rewritten in standard form where a equals 2. So I look at my a right now. So as it stands, it is not positive. So that means it expects me to rewrite this by moving this term to the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. But if you notice, the question's asking for b. So first off, let's go ahead and move all our terms to the side it wants us to. So draw my line. I'm going to move one term first. So the inverse of negative 2x squared is plus 2x squared plus 2x squared. Now you notice on the left there isn't a quadratic term. So basically this is going to be 0x squared there. 0 plus 2 gives me 2x squared minus 6x plus 8 minus 8x plus 20, because this is now gone. Now I'm going to go ahead and keep on my inverses, plus 8 then I'm going to subtract 20 since it's positive, subtract it over here. So I end up with 2x squared plus 2x plus or minus 12 is equal to 0. So now it is in standard form, and I do have it equal to 0. So this is also important because this is the only way you're going to be able to use the quadratic formula. Just because you might see all three terms on one side doesn't mean it's ready to go. You need to make sure that your quadratic equation is equal to 0 to do the standard or to use the quadratic formula. So just to answer this particular question, it says, what is the value of b? So this is a, this is b, this is c, so b is equal to 2. So the answer to this one was pretty straightforward. The answer is 2. Now, to actually use the quadratic formula, you label them like I did. And so let's use the formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. All of this divided by 2a. So x equals negative 2 substituted plus or minus 2 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 12. All this divided by 2 times 2. Now, what I would do is simplify the discriminant first. So this part right here, I'm not sure if you can see that. That needs to be simplified first. So go ahead and do your math. Plus or minus. So 2 squared, that gives me 4 minus 4 times 2 times negative 12. That is, so now I'm going to do negative 4 times 2 times negative 12, which will give me positive 96. So plus 96. All divided by 2 times 2. Now I could go ahead and keep on simplifying. Negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 100, all divided by 4. Since the number is positive, I have 2 real roots. Now, to go ahead and finish out this problem, the square root of 100, and I'm running out of room. So that's negative 2 plus or minus 10 divided by 4. And you could leave your answer like this, or you could keep on simplifying. It really depends on you or the way the problem is written. So this will simplify to negative 1/2 plus or minus 5/2. I have x squared right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and rewrite it. So I got x squared minus 12x is equal to negative 36. So first thing I noticed that it is not in standard form, so I need to get it into standard form. So you got a couple options. You can move 2 terms to the right or 1 term to the left. I'm gonna make it easier for me, so I'm gonna move the 1 term to the left. So plus 36 to both sides. That gives me x squared minus 12x plus 36 is equal to 0. All right, so now that I see that all my terms are on the same side, I could label it. This is A, B, and C. Now, even though there's not a number in front of the x, you gotta remember that this is 1. So A equals 1, B equals negative 12, and C equals 36. Now, I'm gonna use these numbers to do my quadratic formula. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4 times a times c, all this divided by 2a. So insert. All right, so go ahead and start simplifying each part. So negative 12, that gives me a positive 12, because negative times a negative gives us a positive. Negative 12 squared gives me a positive 144 minus 144. All this divided by 2 times 1, which gives me 2. Now at this point I could go ahead and start simplifying. So 12 plus 144 minus 144 gives me 0. So notice that I got 0 there, so that means I have 1 real root just by looking at the inside, this number right here, divided by 2. Now you can go ahead and simplify this some more. So square root of 0 is 0, so that becomes 12 divided by 2 gives me 6. So the answer is 6. All right, here goes another problem. All right, so x squared minus 8x plus 41 is equal to 0. Now you notice right off the bat, this one right here is good to go because it's equal to 0. All the terms are on the same side. You need to label it. A equals 1, B equals -8, C equals 41. So using the quadratic formula, x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. Now substitute everything. X equals -8 plus or minus the square root of -8 squared minus 4 times 1 times 41. All this divided by 2 times 1. I'm going to start my work over here. So -1 times -8 gives me +8 plus the square root of 64 minus 4, 164. All this divided by 2. Now I could go ahead and start simplifying. So I got 8 plus or minus -100 in here, divided by 2. So you notice this number right here is negative, so that means I have 2 complex or imaginary roots since it's negative. Now, in order to simplify this one, I'm gonna have to explain a little. So 8 plus or minus. So whenever you have a negative inside the radical, you need to separate it as follows. So I got -1 times 100. All this divided by 2, and I'm gonna keep on simplifying it. So I got 8 plus or minus square root of -1 times square root of 100, all divided by 2. And so when you take the square root of -1, that turns into I. So you could replace that with I, and the square root of 100 still gives you 10. So I got 8 plus or minus 10 I divided by 2. Now you could keep on simplifying some more. So this will basically turn, because once you divide everything by 2, so this gives you 4 plus or minus 5 I as the answer. So again, the I comes from the square root of -1, so this turns into I, and I got 10 from the square root of 100. And then 4 comes from 8 divided by 2, 5 divided by 2. That would be the answer. All right, so this is a very common problem. It deals with upward velocity and determining how long a object stays in the air due to like parabolas, like that. A ball is dropped from 81 feet off the ground. The equation h equals -16 t squared plus 81 can be used to model the height of the ball in feet after t seconds. How long does it take the ball to reach the ground? So the key word here is hit the ground, because they could always say that the ball is caught at a certain height, like 13. They could say it hit the ground. It could say multiple things. So that actually tells you that your height here is 0 feet. So my height is going to be 0, is equal to -16 t squared plus 81. Now, judging by this, looks like I'm good to go. The only thing here is I'm missing my b term. So when I label everything, a equals negative 16 because that has the t squared. B is going to be 0 because there is no linear term. And C is equal to 81. Now that I have everything labeled, I could go ahead and use the quadratic formula. So I got x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. So substitute 0 plus or minus 0 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times 81. All this divided by 2 times negative 16. So I'm going to come over here to simplify it. That gives me 0 plus or minus square root of 5,184 is going to be negative 32. So now you just take the square root of 5,184. So luckily the square root of 5,184 divided by negative 32. Let's take the square root of this. It gives me plus or minus 72 divided by negative 32. And so when I go ahead and do this, it gives me that my roots are positive 2.25 and negative 2.25 as my solutions. And be mindful that since this number right here, the discriminant was positive, that means I have two real solutions. All right, a baseball is batted from the field 2 feet off the ground. The equation H equals negative 16 t squared plus 24 t plus 2 can be used to model the height of the ball in feet after 10 t seconds. How long was the ball in the air if a fan catches it from 8 feet off the ground? So this one says 8 feet off the ground, so that means I need to change my h to 8 is equal to negative 16 t squared plus 24 t plus 2. Now notice I need to have a 0 here to use the quadratic formula. So I'll do minus 8. X is equal to negative 16 t squared plus 24 t minus 6. Now at this point I could label everything. So A is equal to negative 16, B is equal to 24, C is equal to negative 6. Using the formula, I got negative 24 plus or minus the square root of 24 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times negative 6. All of this divided by 2 times negative 16. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify once more. So 192 isn't a perfect square, so you're going to have to simplify the radical. So I'm going to come over here. So square root of 192 can be broken down to simplify this radical. You'll need to figure out the biggest square roots that multiply to give you 192. So I could break this down to 16 times 12. So now I could take the square root of 16, which gives me 4 times the square root of 12. Then inside 12, I could still break that down to 4 times 3. And I could take the square root of 4, which gives me 4 times 2 times square root of 3. So 8 square root of 3 would be the simplified radical. So I have negative 24 plus or minus 8 square root of 3. All this divided by negative 32. Now you can simplify this some more. The biggest number that divides 24, 8, and 32 is 8. So this will simplify to negative 3 plus or minus 1 square root of 3 if you want to write the 1, divided by negative 4. And then if you want to break it up and simplify it some more, you end up with 3 over 4 plus or minus 1 square root of 3 divided by negative 4. Hopefully this helps. I know this is a very complicated area. If you have any questions, let me know.